Hi, my name is Stephen Haw with Bayou City Fellowship. I am a member here with my beautiful wife and our two sons, Judah and Elliot. My heart for missions really started at the onset. I was saved in November of 2013 from a Buddhist and Catholic family. And so my experience with lostness was immediate. I immediately knew that my own family didn't know the hope of Jesus Christ and the good news. And here recently, I began to learn about unreached people groups, i.e. places in the world that don't have access to the gospel. And so Bayou City Fellowship has partnered with a missionary tourism group called Wawo Ventures. They're a tourism group which is their access into this Muslim part of the world. We had 8 team members, both from Spring Branch and Cypress campus, go over to South Sulawesi, in which 70% of the population of Indonesia is unreached, or people that have little to no access to the gospel, to churches, to Christians, and to the word. Some important context about Indonesia specifically is that it's a very Muslim-dense part of the world, and it's actually illegal to proselytize or to share your faith and try to convert other people. And so the method, the nuance of obeying the law of the land, yet bringing the truth into a place like Indonesia, we as tourists would come in and live in their homes, live life in their shoes, sleep on their floors, eat what they're eating, have open, authentic conversations, and really try to identify any people that we would call people of peace. Anybody that would be open and receptive to hearing more truth and more gospel. Once we leave and come back to the States, the long-term team there would come back, if invited again, to have long-term discipleship, have more conversations around scripture and open the Bible, and just invite them to read. Paul says that he was all things to all people. And so bringing the gospel to a place like Indonesia, we had to be really careful that we weren't also bringing with us the Western world, which just wouldn't connect with their context and their culture. And so there's certain things that we had to be aware of so we wouldn't get completely, shut down before the conversation even started. Certain things like using your right hand to pass off money or gifts. You eat with your right hand, left hand is unclean. Even the way we prayed, right? Instead of praying with our hands together, we would pray with our hands open. And this is how they pray as Muslims. Certain things, especially not referring to yourself as a Christian, but rather as a follower of the prophet Isa. Isa is a prophet in the Quran who is Jesus. And so you're not distorting the gospel by any means or diluting it, but just contextualizing it and delivering it in a way that they could understand. Once we came, we were split into 4 different homes, typically 2 or 3 members from Bayou City, partnered with some team members from Wawo. And they were Indonesian speaking, and they're all believers. And so on the very first night, it was Franz, Kenny, and Caleb and I got to sit down with he's a journalist and also the village secretary. His name is Hillman. And he was just really curious. But we just sat down around a table, and Hillman had a really funny saying. He said that for every cigarette that I smoke, I get 1,000 thoughts. And by the time we were done with our story sharing, he had smoked through like almost 2 packs. But he was really curious about our lives, and we just got to go in a circle and share our testimonies about Jesus and about our life stories. And so Franz shared, I shared. It's almost 11:30 at night, but he was so curious that when I thought we were all going to break off and go to sleep, he points to Caleb and says, "All right, now I want you to share your life story with me." And it was just a fascinating conversation that we got to have the very, very first night. And that just, it birthed some curiosity, and throughout the rest of the weekend, he was asking more and more questions about our beliefs. It was fantastic. God did so much through our team and through me through this trip by the power of the Holy Spirit, nothing in us. So I'll share a couple stories. First, to highlight that God clearly went before us, was there with us while we were there, and actually has gone behind us. The first key story that stood out was Caleb and I were actually staying in a house, and over dinner one night, we're sharing the story. We're talking about all the different languages of Indonesia, all the different languages of the world. It led into a conversation about the Tower of Babel and sharing truth about that and how God scattered all peoples and languages. And then we launched into a story, and essentially it was walking from Genesis to Revelation. And as we're sharing the story about sin and sacrifice, and we eventually get to the story, about Jesus, the husband's name was Murhan. We noticed that Murhan was filling in blanks of the story. He would say things like, "Oh yeah, the prophet Isa, he's the only prophet that's still alive today," which almost had our jaws on the floor. He also said things like the cross, yes, where the prophet Isa was hung. And we had begun to realize as we got through the story that God had gone before us, before we had ever come to the village of Matipila. They had just watched something called the Jesus film. And so you could see this demonstrably, the seeds were planted before we even got there. God was preparing the harvest before we even had come into the village for the first time. And so as we had this conversation, Motorhan was very intrigued by the story we're sharing and was very open to us coming back and sharing more. And so our team actually, the Wawo team, had actually gone back this past week, end of August, to follow up with long-term discipleship, and we hope to hear some really good news about that. A second key story that I'm reminded of is just the openness and the willingness for them to receive us Americans and us foreigners into their village. Within the first couple hours of being in the village of Matipila, Pak Desa, the chief village leader, he mentioned that his son had passed away just last month, his son Ian. And he began to share his heart, he began to share his heartbreak, he passed a picture of his son around the room, and we began to mourn together. There was a moment a few days later in which at a mealtime he just broke down in tears. And we got a chance to pray with him. And on the very last day, Pastor George had the opportunity to sit on the front porch before we were about to leave and just openly share the gospel and openly share about how does one get into the kingdom of heaven. George was able to very just openly share from 2 Corinthians. And it was a really incredible moment to just see that God had gone before us, God was with us, and because our team followed up after we had left, God is going behind us as well. There were things that we had no idea would happen this trip. Some really awesome adventures, such as we got taken to this amazing waterfall, which is a huge feature in this village of Matipila. And next thing you know, Caleb Lockhart, Franz, and a couple others were jumping off a waterfall cliff. And it was a ton of fun. We also got to play in a volleyball tournament. It was Independence Day, and so they had a week-long celebration. We got handed jerseys, and we were asked to play on the volleyball team, which was a lot of fun. And there was also a couple of moments, like part of their Independence Day celebration, they did some line dancing. And guys, these Indonesians can dance. 3 hours of line dancing. Everyone's just covered in sweat. And at one point, I think somebody elbowed the other person and said, "They're really good at dancing. Do you think they could learn Footloose?" And so next thing you know, we're playing Footloose, and the entire village is dancing to the same song, which is just like, it was incredible. We're on the other side of the world. We're in a third world country in a Muslim part of the world. We don't speak the same language, but we're all dancing to Footloose together, and it was just this beautiful moment and really, really funny. It was one of those moments where you had to pinch yourself. One other moment that was a really just kind of funny key standout moment was this young kid comes up to us with this raggedy old guitar. It's wildly out of tune. It's got duct tape all around the edge of it. And the 4 words that he apparently knew in English were, "Jason Mraz, I'm yours." And we're all sitting on the porch and we're like, "Yeah, we know that song." And so moments later, he starts just playing the song completely out of tune, and we start belting out the song, "I'm yours." And as we're playing, the rest of the village starts coming around. And it was just beautiful. I mean, people were dancing in the background and swaying in the background, and we're just belting out the song. And it was awesome. So there were just really cool moments where, across cultures, across traditions, across languages even, there was just a real connection there. And it was beautiful. And so I'd urge you to just know that it's very doable. It is not as daunting as you might think. People are people. We have all the same pains and tragedies that we walk through, and we all need the same love from the same God. So for us, one of the things that the Lord spoke to me while I was over there, I was sitting on the side of a beach and listening to 2 different called prayers being broadcasted over loudspeakers, and my heart began to go heavy with the reality that there are millions, potentially billions of people responding to those very call to prayers around the world. And it was heartbreaking. And so for me personally, Romans 10:14 really came to life. of, how will they call on him in whom they have not believed? And how will they believe in him in whom they have not heard? And how will they hear without someone to go and preach? It was very evident that God is doing things in that part of the world, and we'll continue this partnership with Wobble Ventures and other partners in that area. But the message needs messengers. And so if you're feeling called by God, if you're feeling something stirring in your heart, again, I highly encourage you to go reach out to George, reach out to anyone that went on this trip, and let us know you're interested, and we'll definitely be planning a trip back. So we'd love to have you with us.